Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Today I thought we would take a break from the purely analytical reviews of various things like the moon landings or ISS or soon to be the new episode on the Mars landings and rovers and stuff. And kind of make an episode about the feeling of this whole thing and the thought process in between. I've done this once before, a long time ago, which is really the psychology about it all. But it's good to review, isn't it? Because it kind of develops over time. You know, with any belief system that's on the internet today, especially, you typically have very polarized people. They believe it one way or they believe it the other way. And there's not usually too many people you can find in between. Part of it's because of, social pressures to take a position or not, you're pushed into either category. It's kind of like the whole left-right paradigm, but where almost all of us intelligent people are in the middle, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Stabilization, right? Consistency. We like that. We figured out a system of how to do it. And there's sort of a lunacy around ever switching from systems of beliefs sometimes. If you figure out how to bathe yourself and you stay healthy as a result of the method by which you learn how to bathe, do you need to change it because a new shampoo comes out or a new soap comes out or someone says, I sell a new product that replaces that product, so I say that product's bad and you believe it? That sound like craziness, right? I think it's safe to say that if you've believed something your entire life and then suddenly it gets massively disputed, not a little bit disputed, but massively disputed, it still doesn't mean you're wrong by any means, okay? But when you look at, the group that is conflicting with my beliefs, let's just say, they've done a massive amount of research. When it comes to the nuts and bolts, almost literally, of what we're talking about here, they have thousands and thousands of hours. And you've just got someone that told you when you were a kid that this was true. Religion is littered with this stuff, right? I told you guys a long time ago that one of the biggest threats of organized religion is the same threat we have with the groupthink conditioning. People yelling at you who you perhaps love in your family or your friend circles because you don't go along with what they're saying. And there's no proof that what they're saying is correct. And in some cases, there's no need for you to believe one way or the other. The other day I mentioned Noah's Ark because my entire life, even as a child, that is just one story out of the Bible that you're kind of going, really? Really? Okay. So if you believe in that, why don't you still believe in Santa Claus? Why not? You have about as much proof. Oh, well, you think, wow, I don't get any presents on Christmas morning from Santa Claus, so he must not exist. And it's like, well, maybe you're a bad boy. Maybe you're a bad girl. Maybe you're just too old to get them anymore because you're not a child anymore. I mean, one could say anything to back it up. You weren't there. You weren't there, right? What is the significance of it all? Well, it's to freak out everyone that if the world gets really nasty, God will be an angry, uneducated soul and flood the whole place. Remember, he made the problem that has to be fixed in that story. That's why it's an asinine problem. With Sodom and Gomorrah, the whole thing was that if there's one person in the city that still believed in God's ways, he wouldn't raise the cities. And eventually, I guess, one day, the last couple walked out and boom, he nailed those cities. You mean to tell me that an entire world of people and every continent, every place that he bestowed souls, that we have found people living on every continent, everyone learned about God the right way and rejected God in the wrong way, and therefore death. And then how did they get back on those continents? Isn't that weird? Wouldn't you think if you wiped one out, then that's it? It's inhabited by birds, something like that. Things that could fly in the air when the water was here. Oh boy. With things that like science programs that have legitimate wings and illegitimate wings, The illegitimate wings are typically pretty tiny compared to the overall contribution of some of these organizations. I think in some cases, it depends on how you view contributions. If you love war and you really love just knowing that last night a bunch of people got killed by some really wild weapons that some really brilliant people made, then you're going to be really happy with a lot of the organizations that are considered to be part of aerospace. And you ain't seen nothing yet, right? The new next generation, like I think it was in Top Gun Maverick, it's what's called 5th generation or whatever, those insane stealth fighters. All I can say is if you can still see them in a movie, they're not the top ones, okay? Part of it is employing the most brilliant people in your country. There's a whole theory about that. Forget what we do. Forget about us saying we're one place or the other. What we're doing is we're cultivating a culture, unfortunately, of tons of obedience and almost like blind obedience. But we're encouraging kids to go through and instead of just getting a degree, they get their master's. Instead of a master's, they get their PhD. Instead of just getting their PhD and then packing groceries later, they end up, coming up with methods of stabilizing protons in a magnetic tube. They come up with a better booster rocket. Those are interesting contributions that can be applied towards the good and can be applied towards the bad. I think one of the misnomers we're dealing with here is, and we don't really ask anybody to tell us what they're really thinking, and I'm not even sure we consciously itemize what we're thinking. But imagine you were a person that believed we went to the moon. It's very important to you. You're probably 65 or above, so you were more of an adult when you watched TV, the television, showing you what they said was true in grainy black and white, okay? But when that person who really gets angry at my videos, which is actually not that many, listens to what they believe to be blasphemy, why is there blasphemy? I mean, what is the Kubler-Ross itemization, each one of their thing? Why are they angry? Why are they in denial? Why would they ever negotiate? And why did they accept, right? Usually it's just anger and denial going in a loop, right? Why do they hate me? Why do they hate you? Well, hate's a strong word, but why are they disagreeing? Why do they think that we're idiots when a lot of us have studied physics and mathematics from childhood? Just from childhood. So we have an instinctual understanding of a particle field, inside some thermodynamic or some Newton's third law conservation of energy. We're seeing it, and we've done things with that knowledge that others haven't, let's just say. And the person that steps in the room who doesn't have any prowess or academic vocation in those areas at all, they're good people and they have great skills in whatever. Maybe they're a real estate agent, maybe they're a guy that fixes cars, whatever it is, right? They don't have any knowledge in this area. They just really trigger and get angry. We need to talk about it because we need more people to question reality, I think. I don't want to make anyone question reality to the point where, like Data in Star Trek, they learn so much data around the world and they're taught to, like his little thing was to try to connect as many facts together to contrive a conspiracy, and he did. And in the end, it wasn't true. I'm pretty sure that's the way that episode ended. We don't want to do that to ourselves. And all of us have. We've done it in our personal lives. There's a negative, soupy, tarry feeling when you hang on to a lie. Whether you know what the truth is, doesn't matter. There's a built-in, almost God-given little meter inside you that says, I don't want to lie, least of all to myself. It's much, much easier. I don't even know what the fraction of a percent of difficulty it is to tell a lie to somebody else, even if you don't like lying. That, whatever that difficulty was, to lie to yourself, it's exponentially, it's 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 10 more difficult to lie to yourself. But remember, you're good at what you do, so be careful what you do. Some people see the truth and lies as merely picking their battles. Shut up about it and let's just move on. It's a thing in the past. Don't worry about it. And I would say that if we had pure evidence, let's just say the world got a lot better. Politicians weren't made of complete scumbags. The world elite have all died off. All the mechanisms by which they control us are no longer. We have legislated them out of existence. We simply live. We don't harm each other. We might argue, but that's about it. And then someone says, do you know we didn't go to the moon back in 69? You go, well, yeah, it's old news. It doesn't matter anymore. The people that did that and the organizations that behave the same way, killing people like Gus Grissom, giving him a cyanide air supply with his two comrades, they all died of cyanide and they were burned up to hide the evidence, right? Or to give a real excuse as to why they died. Somebody killed them. A security guard at the filming of the first moon mission murdered a guy who was another security guard. He was the head of security. He was given a medal for doing so, but he did it without official approval. But they still said, good job, man. Now, what's funny about that, or kind of eerie about that, is it was still his word versus the other guy's death. He had no ability to defend himself in a court of law. That guy could have simply been in an argument with that dude. I don't think this is the case. He could have murdered that guy and then just told his boss, yeah, he was going to tell on the moon missions. He felt insecure about it. I don't know the true facts of it, but unless he had a letter written, was indistinguishable handwriting, or they didn't have email back in those days, some recording of him saying it, then it's really just his word against the guy's dead body. You got a medal for it. But if we could say all that's gone, people don't act like that anymore. Either by way of technology that prevents us from doing that to each other, technology that enforces a constitution that's global, that is like no more usury, freedom of speech, and, maybe in the end, once, this is a Star Trek Gene Roddenberry kind of comment, but maybe there's no more guns and wars and bombs and things because it's all been neutralized. There's no more suffering. There's no more haves and have-nots. Everyone has the same thing, and it's good. And to the dismay of many folks in this world, gluttony is also removed. Having more than you need simply because you're medicating your own boring life. The thing I say all the time about people getting angry with us is that obviously they have usurped these events into their own definition of who they are. They've externalized who they are to another event instead of just looking in the mirror and going, I'm a good person. Nope. They needed the moon missions to complete themselves. They didn't, but they've told themselves that internal lie. The mechanism paradigm of doing that is a lie, and the event they brought in just so happened to be a bundle of lies. So that's the first one. The second one is sort of your nationalism, pride of your country. America said they did it first. Okay. So if you're an American and you see the destruction of America over the decades, right, really falling down in the 90s, and it's just been hell on earth since the 90s, right? Glorifying gangster rap, murder, murders that hurt, not just the old 30s noir films where a guy just goes, oh, and falls down, there's no blood or anything, right? Nope, they'll show it all to you, and they'll show it to you in ways that can't even be done. It's not even possible to be done, with special effects, all kinds of horrific shits in your brain. And so they look at the country for No Country for Old Men methodology in their brain, and they go, which is a very legit thing, and they'll say, see, it's because of people like you, us, that deny things like the moon mission that has allowed the very fabric of society to deteriorate. They no longer have pride in their country, least of all the lying America, as you put it. If any of you have seen the movie The Last Temptation of Christ, I won't spoil it for you in this episode, but there's a moment because Jesus comes down off the cross. It's a very important, super religious movie, and by the time the movie's over, it will have answered the question of why Jesus had to stay on that cross. So if you call it blasphemous, you're ignorant and you need to see the film. It should move you deeper than any other Christ movie that has ever been made. Okay? If you miss it, go back to school, kids. But there's a moment when Christ meets Paul in this plaza. In the Bible, Paul never met Christ, right? Paul was Saul. He was the killer of Christians. And he had a light hit him in the desert, and God told him, look, knock it off. Not only are you going to stop killing Christians, this whole thing is legit, and you're going to evangelize them for the rest of your life. But in the film, because of this very interesting Twilight Zone twist to it, to drive home a point even better than any other movie, Jesus walks up to Paul and in the plaza, and Paul is yelling why Jesus had to die on the cross. But Jesus in this film, in the first act, was allowed to get off the cross for a very specific reason. And he says, brother, who are you? And he says, I'm Paul. And he says, well, I'm paraphrasing the dialogue, but he says, I'm Jesus. I didn't die on the cross. Why are you telling people I died on the cross? And Paul goes, you need to go back over there, right? Get away from me. These people need this story to fix their lives, to give their souls to God. You go away. Okay? And there's a lot of people who believe the same exact theme, the same mechanism about the moon missions, about everything that America ever espouses. And now it's been abstracted away from nationalism. They're doing it on purpose. They're pushing it into SpaceX. They're pushing it into Bezos' organization, Richard Branson's organization. Losing the connection with the country and pushing it just like Rollerball in 1975, right? Or 76, right? 75. They're pushing it into corporations. That's what that movie is about. That's why I removed, or one of the reasons why I covered that film and why you need to see it and understand it, right? This mechanism is also repeated within your families if you have any children or even a spouse, but definitely with children. It's much easier to talk about it from a child's point of view with the parent. One of the reasons why you have to parent from the first day that they are born and not only parent when they start behaving badly. This is what the big mistake is, because we're so gluttonous as human beings. A child is not the top priority in America. A child's like this thing over there. And I'm going to kick his butt once he acts up, instead of fathering the child so they learn your ways and your systems and they understand. Be ready for explanation after explanation. Don't just say because. But if you let your kid become a renegade being, and it's very tough because of social media, it's very tough because of the schools are so crappy, there comes a point when they have grown away from you, and now you need to bridge a gap for them to return back to sanity. It's the same problem we have with folks that have swallowed the blue pill about a particular subject matter. They've researched nothing. They feel like an expert because they posted 1,000 NASA articles on their social media page, right? That makes them an expert instantaneously. I've been watching this my whole life. Yes, you have been watching that your whole life. And that's all you've done is watch it. You haven't gotten into the very fabric of the science of what's going on. And there's so many divisions of science you have to master. At least get to a point where you can have a decent conversation with someone who's extremely educated in it. But also, we know people with PhDs. I work with a ton of PhDs. They're in my family. They're not always the smartest, can in the six-pack. There's people who are really good at school. And there's a lot of ways to get PhDs and not have a single iota of knowledge about what you're talking about. It's amazing. It's the old argument, what do you know from knowledge? Wisdom is knowledge practiced, right? Most of the scientists that I have followed in life who have deviated from what they learned in college was because they never left the laboratory. Either literally or figuratively, they took what they learned every day and brought it back to the laboratory and tested what was in the books. And in some cases, some important cases, they discovered that things don't even remotely work like what the books say. So they feel like they've discovered something. They feel like they've seen something new. They go back to their 10-year professors and they say, oh, eureka, I've got something new for the college to champion. Not realizing that the college was part of the contributing force of curbing education so that no one discovered how that particular thing worked. Thus remaining ignorant, thus remaining under the thumb of an organization above. One of the other challenges that we have, depending on how old you are, Okay? If you're 50 and older and you really study this stuff, you could be younger, but the younger you are and the more you're on board, the more brilliant you are as a human being. And I would give you extra trophies for being both educated and open-minded, and you've actually discovered for facts by yourself, or, with the spawning of others. You're standing on other people's shoulders. But if you find this stuff and you realize it, you're the exception to the rule under 50. Why do I say 50 and above? Well, because you have to come from a pre-internet age. You have to come from an age when wise men or wise women told you how things work. And it always worked because they had usurped people that had passed those particular little nuggets of wisdom for 1,000 years or more. Why am I mentioning that? Well, I think we all know now that information is censored live, right? The Matrix is now, and the Matrix is being created as you exist. History is rewritten the second after it occurs. Today now, they're ahead of the game. They want to do a fake slap on the Oscars. Well, they've already got it all pre-produced way ahead of time. Guards were told 6 hours before an event is going to occur on stage. Do not respond to it. Comes from a 1 degree away buddy who was a part of that detail in a senior position. So today, they're just waiting for all of us over 50 folks to die off. And to keep our voice down, right? To keep us shadow banned so no one really finds out about anything. On this show, you find out about a lot of stuff. And what's funny about it is I've got so many episodes that may or may not help you, but I'm trying to help you in all areas of life. Okay, there's a lot of fun stuff too, right? It's just fun to go over, like spontaneous combustion. I'm really proud of that episode. But you're not to get ahead in any metric of life at all, ever. If there was a way for them to push a button, I mean, just think about it. Pick your favorite corrupt politician. And they had a computer in front of them. And it was like, here's everything that people have talked about on the internet that helps them. And here's all the stuff that is misguiding and misdirecting people to fail in life. And pushing these buttons actually removes viewers from these folks or blocks them completely and gives all those viewerships down to the stuff that hurts people. What do you think would happen? What do you think's been happening with all these big, giant corporate platforms? You were told to literally worship social media platforms. Anytime a significant fact is presented on television, with flying quotes, of course, and they tell you that the authority around that fact is a social media company, wow. Wow. That's so far beyond rollerball. We're getting close to like THX 1138 thinking. The corporation is it. Which one? Well, right now we have several for you to be caught in and get, some people are TikTok people, some people Instagram people, Facebook people, et cetera, X or whatever. Okay, you're caught in these different catches because that's the one that appeals to you. Legitimately good things are occurring on those platforms from time to time. You reconnect with an old friend, something else, you find some toy that you've been wanting since you lost it when you were a kid, and you find it again. Okay, but they're designed to catch you. And they're designed to keep you in a little loop so that you never escape. And as long as you spend your time in a loop, it doesn't matter if it's a little game you got off your phone or your iPad or whatever, or if it's just some discussion with people like 80s arcade games or whatever, your favorite movie that you keep talking about for 40 years after it's happened. They love it. They love it because you're not researching anything for sure. Your second that something legitimate shows up, let's say some other program like Telegram, and there's a fairly decent channel in there. It seems like the person who created the channel's got some great content in there. Well, the second they get a whole bunch of followers, a couple things starts happening, right? They can't turn on comments because if they do, oh my gosh, here come the bots. But if you don't turn on comments, you usually don't get a lot of followers. It's the discussion behind whatever you post that makes it interesting. Well, now you're chasing away a bunch of bots that are advertising all kinds of stuff, contacting everyone who replies and pretending like they're you, copying your icon, copying your name, pretending to be you. If you really get hot and you really get some good information and you start hurting the poker game that they're playing up above, but then you could even get that corporation to ban you. It's happened. Now, there's other ways of kind of looking at this information. The first thing we do as sort of novice conspiracy people which is a horrible thing to call us, right? But whatever. We'll wear it with the badge of honor, right? People who discover the truth, is we want other people to see what we've seen because we're so excited. Because everyone's going through that Kubler-Ross thing. First we're angry, then we're in denial ourselves. Even if it's just for a split second, then we negotiate what we think is acceptable, and then we accept it and we move on with life. Eventually you want to share this with everybody, right? You have been enlightened. You feel better. You want to share that beautiful freedom you have in your chest because it's gone and you never even realized it crawled in there, but it was taught to you in school. It was taught to you on TV. Depending how young you are, it was taught to you on the internet. Every single day it claims that it's true. But that doesn't work very well, does it? Only a best bud of yours, or a bestie if you're a girl, will sit down with their chin on her hands and go, tell me what you learned. I don't know if I've ever really had that from anybody. I got a buddy who loves to listen to what I say. He believes probably most of it. He'll ask me some questions, but he's a real talented sit on the fence guy, and I totally respect that. He will go, wow, that does make sense, man. But he doesn't say to me, I totally just changed my beliefs to your beliefs. It's unnecessary for me anymore. It's fun when people kind of go, man, you're right. Yeah, man. And what happens is they have just been on the edge of that little cliff, and they've been, man, this doesn't feel right. But they're like, I don't have the time to go and research stuff, but I'm intelligent. I just need someone to share with me what's inside Schrodinger's box, right? So you share and something beautiful happens. It's great. The us and them thing is very interesting, isn't it? Because one of the huge shifts in your brain of thinking that there's an us and them, right? When you're a kid, it's all us, unless your parents are like racist and pointing out people and making thems happen or whatever. But there's us, and if your us pool is big enough coast to coast, you don't have to worry about them. You got a couple oceans protecting you in America, so we just OD on us. But as you get more trained with all these divisive paradigms that a particular organization of political nature tries to get people to do, they get you to hate any tiny difference between you and someone else, and then they blame it on a different party. It's the weirdest thing. They came up with it. They manufactured it, which means they're projecting from their interior hatred for things and others. And then they say it's not us, it's them. It's like, well, wait a minute. I was hanging out with them earlier and they didn't say anything about it. And we were all kind of happy at the barbecue. And it seemed like all the people that you say we shouldn't like were all at that party, and they're all making sure we get home safe. Everybody brought food. We were enjoying that guy's food and this girl's food, and they're from completely different parts of the world. It was amazing. But I walk into your camp and all of a sudden it's all hatred, right? So the minute you have a bunch of thems, you have more thems than there is an us. And there's a point to this when it comes to conversations about things that are traditionally taught being completely different. See, the guy who thinks that we went to the moon, he is an us with who? He is an us with NASA. He is an us with, perhaps if he's old enough, NASA, aka America, right? Your more cerebral kind will be us as in those with PhDs or aspiring to have a PhD in their life. Okay? Well, their thems are us, right? I'm almost sounding like Bill Clinton here, right? What I'm trying to push for is this revealing of the truth tellers and the liars, the manipulators, and those of us just trying to get along, like Rodney King said. It's probably the greatest things any one person said from such a strange guy, right? Can't we all just get along? Doesn't mean can't we all just get along with each other's lies in the world. It means can't we just reset this whole thing, and just go, okay, well, was that what your grandfather did to my grandfather? Well, they're gone now. And that might have been a bad thing. But are we good? Are we good? For the grandkids, are we good? All right, well, hey man, high five, boom, fist bump. Let's do this. What else do you want to do? Let's do something new. We're trying to create a bigger us of people that are simply doing no harm to others. To think that Magna Carta, aka the first 10 Bill of Rights in the Constitution of the United States, is a great way to live. Does that cover everything? No. But we can work that other stuff out. One of the tough things that has happened in my lifetime, I've definitely been with people that thought we went to the moon or couldn't accept it. They didn't even want to have the conversation. All right, well, I'm not a jerk. I don't need to push anybody into the conversation they don't enjoy. Never mentioned it, and we always had a great time. We did all kinds of others. I talked about other conspiracies, just nuts, right? Deep ones, big ones, right? Way bigger than the moon mission stuff. Totally on board with all that stuff, but that one was just a cherished thing. And then you have the guy that wants to kind of talk about it all the time, but wants to be sort of like, did I tell you how smart I am by how dumb these other people are? Now, we all fall into that a little bit because it's somehow fascinating why someone would be in a closed car wearing a mask. It's just, what are you thinking, man? Why don't you clean your car out? If it's that bad, you have to wear a mask. My God. One of the most powerful things I've realized without even trying, or I should say it was an accident when it first happened, and now I do it probably more intentionally, is finding someone who has a problem with it and they want to get in a fist fight over it. I mean, almost literally. Is to tell them, look, I'm with you, man. I went down that path. For all intents and purposes, some of us were like prodigy kids with this stuff. I mean, everything we read, we remembered for the most part. And you get a little number here off and there, and a year off there, and a big deal. The science of it, of what they said, was the way that it worked, is what you believe. But you get to a point where you're like, wait a minute, there's not enough pieces and parts to build this Lego castle here. And I believe there was a Lego castle there. How did I believe that? And that's how you wake up, But empathizing a little bit with the other person and simply saying, yeah, man, I was all the way up until my 30s, early 30s, before I'd taken information I heard when I was early 20s and applied it to this other information I got in my early 30s. And then all of a sudden, all these dots connected, and I ran into the right people with the right leaked footage to wake up, to start my journey, just to start it. Isn't it funny every time you start a vehicle in this world, other than electric motors, there's always a spark. There's always some huge thing. Back in the day, you had to get the magneto all aligned, and you had to pump this engine and get the combustion engine going. There's always a big boom, and the thing starts, right? That's kind of the way it is, isn't it? We have to have talent in the social and psychological layers of sharing what we know. Otherwise, you need to be a person that's completely cool, and there's nothing wrong with this. Completely cool with it's just you. You're the only one in the village who figured it out. And you don't care if anyone else in the village knows. You don't care. You literally sleep like a baby every single night. I have rarely met those people, at least with acknowledgement, right? I've rarely met those people, but maybe they're being so quiet, I meet them and I don't even know. One of the things that's funny in a cigar lounge is that there's crosstalk. This is a wild dynamic. Okay, and I don't have any other place I can name that's like this. There probably is millions of these places, but we sit in chairs, okay, and we smoke sticks together. Now, the funny thing is, you pick a place and you go there all the time. It's usually because it's by where you live, or it's the place you want to go because it has your friends. And you'll sit down, and your best bud will be, for whatever reason, because of seating, there's a couple other people that are new. Your buddy's like way on the end over there. And it depends on the atmosphere of the room. If everybody's pretty fun-loving, talking a lot, everyone's cool and relaxed, you can do this more often. Some are even more tight than this room. But you'll say something like, would you see the whole thing about Project Orion that's trying to figure out whether they could put humans through the Van Allen belt because they say they're deadly now, but they supposedly went through them dozens of times during the Apollo missions. Isn't that funny? So-and-so. And there's a guy stuck in the middle. It's literal crosstalk. And this guy has a choice of chiming in or chiming out or attacking. It's a very interesting thing. Most of the time, it's one of two things. Probably 30% of the time, someone chimes in and goes, yeah, isn't that crazy? And they start throwing cool data out there and you're like, whoa. And then they'll be like, yeah, my brother worked for NASA during this time and that. And my uncle, yeah, he knew we didn't go because he worked for NASA, blah, blah, blah. He worked for Bill Casing and, figured it all out. And then you'll get the quiet type is the other 2/3. Very rare. 1% of the time you get a guy's angry. Last time this happened to me, I was at a different lounge. Didn't know it, but the guy across from me was drunk. But he's a smart drunk. And and a guy sits down, he's a big talker. He just literally, a thought goes in his brain and he's got to talk. It's the weirdest thing. He's a lovable guy, but damn. He starts asking me about the moon missions something. He's just like kind of guy. And I'm like, yeah, this, that, and this. And he's going after one thing after another. Now, the funny thing was the drunk guy is sitting directly across from me because it's kind of a horseshoe configuration chairs. 2 chairs over there, 2 chairs over there, 2 facing into the TV. And I'm like working on my computer. I could really care less if this conversation is occurring. And this guy starts looking at me and starts kind of uttering gibberish. It's kind of funny. But he had this really confrontational thing. And I think maybe his mommy hugged him a little too much when he was a kid. This is when a guy could get bitch slapped to death, starts running his mouth like he can survive a bar fight. It's really funny, man. I didn't realize he was drunk because he wasn't slurring. Then he just starts going into gibberish mode, talking about his background, which I could not to this day understand what the hell he said. He's trying to mention some government organization he worked for, nothing I've even heard of, which that means you don't work for anybody that matters at this point when it relates to this conversation. I know all the organizations you could possibly work for that would be related to our conversation. And so I let him do his thing for, 4 or 5 comments, and I'm trying to have a conversation with my friend. But he starts now getting a little aggro, right? And this is just a personal story. I probably shouldn't even mention it because it doesn't have a thing, but I want to give you an example of the stuff I've gone through, the spectrum of stuff. So again, that 99% is split up in those other thirds. So I can't remember what I said, but I barked something at him a little bit. I even got the woman who's working that night to kind of put her head over the counter like, ooh, we're going to have a problem. Now he backed down because he could sense, okay, he's pushing the wrong buttons and he's in no position to do anything about it, right? It's like, have your opinion, bro. It's what I said. Now, the funny thing was, I think a couple of days later, I bumped into him and or maybe before he left or something, he was apologizing to me. I saw him a couple more times. It was all good. It was like, hey, man, it's all right. You don't have to go along with what we're saying, man. It's totally cool if you want to believe something else. But don't get angry about it, right? Or you get angry, but don't point it at anybody. So you have to survive all of this toiling if you want to start opening your mouth and sharing anything. So one of the reasons why I made this show, because I can put it out there, and if you don't want to see it, you'll just skip the video 99% of the time. I don't watch videos I don't want to see. I do it all the time. Hopefully you do too. There's only so many minutes in a day, and the time is something you never get back, my friends. So don't waste your time. You're not going to go into a pit of people that believe one thing and say some profound thing and have them walk away being changed. They'll hate you even more because you prove that they were wrong right into their face. There's something about a person being wrong that is a genetic problem for human beings. It really is. When you're wrong, we know that if you were wrong in the past, let's go way, way back, say 5,000 years or something. We don't know what that world was like, but I'm sure the repercussions of being wrong in that world were devastating. Wrong could mean you're dead. Wrong could mean you're ostracized. Wrong could mean you're punished and tortured until you die, right? But whatever that mechanism is, we strive to be right, or I should say correct. Right is actually that little phenomenon that's on the internet. Being right means you're wrong, but you really wish you were. People live their entire lives trying to be experts at things, trying to say, I am an expert at this one thing. I do it every day and I'm great at it. So therefore, if I form an opinion about something else, the God syndrome, right? Well, I'm just automatically correct. I'm so smart, I've fallen uphill my entire life. It doesn't mean you're not talented. It just means you're instinctively talented at whatever you're doing. And the other one is, on our side, I just want to mention something that probably happens to a lot of you. There are many of you that watch this show. I would think almost every single one of you, if not every one of you, that watch this show, you're a big thinker. Like you think all the time. And you're thinking about hundreds of subjects in a single day, which is why I make hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes so that you can find a like mind that'll talk about exactly that weird thing that you were thinking about. It allows you to hear someone else maybe guide you down some different branches in the tree of this particular subject matter. You know, that metaphor is a great metaphor. I'm just going to digress for 1 second. When you write a screenplay, you're writing a tree in your brain. You're writing everything down. It's a tree, okay? And what you're doing is every little branch, which just, you know, is infinite. It's a fractal, right? You're trying to find the one branch path that is the most unique branch path with the premise that you've put down. So if I tell you a guy comes back from the future to kill a woman in the past, or a robot comes back from the future to kill a woman in the past to stop the future from happening, but a dude also comes back to save her from the robot, that's a pretty cool premise, right? All right. But now, how do I turn that into a story that you're going to care about? I got to find the most brilliant branch combination, the entire journey. Everything's entertaining. Every branch is better than every other branch that I could have gone down, right? So as you manage your thought process in your life and you've got all these thoughts, every single time you change a subject in your brain, you reload the new tree. And the tree's got the video game saved, right? Wherever you went last, that you last thought was the best branch, it'd say that's blue. And all the branches you went down that didn't pan out because you considered it and you're like, no, I don't think that's true. At least right now, I don't think it's true. Maybe that's red. And the maybe line is orange or something. I probably should have used green for the good color, right? So it'd be red, yellow, green or something. But organizing your thoughts is huge as you're trying to legitimize and see a particular fact from a bunch of different angles. That's what I'm doing with the new moon episodes and all the new episodes, is to see it from a bunch of different angles to go, now, but what about this and what about that? So we can consider it in a way that we're not following their path to decide our truths, because that's another way of manipulating you. You know, there's that whole thing. You've seen it in 100 television shows, some movies where a problem occurs for someone. And you'll see how the PR agencies do it. They say, we're going to get ahead of the problem. Well, you know, I guess you did rape your ex-wife or, you know, or killed her or whatever. So we're going to get ahead of it. And we're going to put a bunch of like mixed stories out there to cloud up the truth around you. And we're going to put out some other stories that seem very similar to you. And so when someone mentions your story, someone on your side can go, no, you got it mistaken. It's the other guy you're talking about. No, that guy's actually good. They get ahead of the story. With the facts about the moon missions, you have a ton of misinformation being put out there that people hang on to without any research into what they're saying. You might grab one and swallow one. And later you're like, oh my God, that's not a big one. We don't need to go down that path. That's a red herring, right? That's why a lot of the other episodes I do is about nothing more than you picking one way to control your brain a little bit better. Because when you need to apply the science of your thinking to something that you think is really important, You need that motor in your brain to be just oiled and perfect. And you've replaced two little gears and made it one gear, because keep it simple, stupid is the best way to build the best, most powerful engine. Why do car manufacturers have reputations for building crappy cars? And then if they can stay alive for 60, 80 years, suddenly that car is the most reliable car in the world. Why? Because they've built it and built it and built it hundreds of thousands of times. They shipped the cars that were broken and looked at them in the laboratory and went, oh my God, well, it's that thing right there. And someone will be like, oh, we make that thing better. And that solves it for a little while. But the genius walks in and goes, you know what? I got a whole new system. We don't even need that thing anymore. We're going to take 20 parts and make them 12. Bigger, thicker, stronger, better performance. Oh, why didn't we think of that, right? Paradigm shift. We need to be that efficient with how we process all of our information. And it's a learning process, and it's one of those beautiful learning processes that you're going to keep your whole life. And think about it. It's a funny story. I found a channel online where a guy repairs video cards, and this guy is an utter genius with how he repairs super high-end video cards, like 4090s and all the way down. And I watched this guy, and I know electronics pretty good, but this guy is ridiculous. His soldering skills are like next level, right? I was watching him for like a week and just sitting there for like 2 hours watching him go over about 20 to 30 minute repairs. And his diagnostic capability infected me, reignited something in me. And I was writing a program. I'm running a mobile app that talks to like massive layers of backend code. And I'm in a brand new database in a brand new area, porting an app that I just finished into another paradigm. It's going to do a very similar thing, but a bunch of stuff's missing on the back end because it's an old piece of code. But I used the mechanisms that this guy used to fix video cards and diagnosing shorts and power supplies and bad memory and bad ISO chips and bad oscillators. And I'm looking at stuff, and all of a sudden I felt myself zero in on the code way easier than ever before. And so that's just another example of how when you discern information better and learn how to use Occam's razor more often, you can get down to some serious solutions. And it's all the Hollywood science that you have to undigest. You have to barf all that out of your system and go, okay, go back to the basics of cause and effect. A vacuum is a zero in any mathematical equation. So any force applied to a vacuum kills Newton's third law. Sorry, folks. There's a huge problem with navigating space with fire engines. Funny thing, some viewers said, he said, well, it's not really fire, it's liquid oxygen. I'm like, this is a mechanism to make sure it happens in space, that's all. It's still fire, bro. It's still just like concussion on a cone. It's supposedly correcting a vector in a vacuum. Sorry, you can't talk to a zero. You just can't. It's nothing. Nobody wants to believe that I know on this planet that we didn't go to the moon, that we don't have any rovers on Mars, that the ISS is just a big Hollywood show for some weird reason. There seems to be something up there, but why the hell is all the footage just fake as a $3 bill? What's the deal? I don't understand. And so you think about it. Obviously, laundering money is gigantic. Laundering technology into black projects, that makes sense, right? And then all the other subdermal stuff like inspiring kids to get into science so they can actually make weapons and not space stuff, right? It'll just drift. It'll just naturally drift. When there's no jobs in that market, you're going to get jobs in this market. It's just a by design thing. And of course, nationalism, which is why all these third world countries have suddenly landed on the moon. I just saw a thing yesterday. I'll just tell you the full quick story. There's a rapper in Korea that I love. His name's Top. It's all hyphenated, T.O.O.P. He's just this crazy, cool, wild guy. He's part of a band called Big Bang, which has some pretty cool production, just amazing production value. When you get into Hollywood and you get into music and you see their kind of things, you're just like, whoa, amazing. And it's all this guy named G-Dragon made all the music, which I just found out recently. All these incredible songs with record-breaking label and charting on these songs. Incredible. But anyway, I looked up Top because he's separated from the band. I said, I wonder what Top's doing. And I never saw him speak English before. And there's this wild video where he's in his little lab at his house. And he's a very eccentric looking guy. He's like David Bowie was Korean. Just the most stylish guy on planet Earth. And he is doing this video about being the part of the first team that goes to the moon from Korea. And I'm looking at this going, what? It's a couple of years old, I think. It's 2022, I think. I haven't even heard of Korea going to the moon. When I study the news, by the way, I go through every continent, every major country, and South Korean news is one of the places I stop every day to read their news. Very interesting to see other countries and what they prioritize against and how they spend what they spend, right? Never heard of this. But that's a form of nationalism. I mean, if Korea ever went to the moon, pat them on the back, man. Great, because they win. Well, China supposedly put a thing up there. We talk about all the time. Israel, India. It's just a thing that's happening now like crazy because they control the spin machine. They control us criticizing any fraudulent photographs, any laughable physics. They got us down to a reservoir of nothing, right? Hopefully it's a way of culling the masses into something good. But since almost every other category I can think of is culling people into the worst they could possibly be, right? In any area of their life, it's the worst they could possibly be. No one's really inspiring anyone, unless you're going to serve them, right? So you can get a good education if you're willing to serve them once you're done. If you're truly the aristocracy, yeah, your kid gets to go to Harvard and start their own business. But typically, what's it, the two brothers that really created what became Facebook, and their little shilly guy came in and said, I'm a coder, which he isn't. They take it over and DARPA the whole thing out. It's two Harvard kids that started it, right? Harvard has a thing. And so these other Ivy League schools. You do have to be smart. You can't be a kid that is just trying to get something for nothing, unless you're a president's son. I will say, having been privileged to meet a few of you in real life or through some sort of communication, usually our Patreons get that kind of access. You all seem to be very happy, or at least equipped to deal with any bad news much better than everybody else. But in the end, you live inside yourself. That's the thing I always try to stress with my personal friends. It's like, look, no, you live in your body. And your body should be a temple. You should take care of your body. It's what you wake up in every single day. But what's controlling the whole body, soul, mind mechanism? It's your brain. That thing has to be detoxified and it has to be stimulated constantly for you to not end up a vegetable in some rest home someplace, right? I'll tell the story again. This might seem a little off base, but this is sort of a life experience when we talk about being true to yourself and making maybe some sacrifices when you're younger so you have less sacrifice when you're older, less pain when you're older. I used to go in the late 80s, early 90s, I got caught up in a church that I forgot how, I think my girlfriend had a little appointment there. I don't even remember. I think it was one day she went to this hospice. And it was a mixed hospice, right? So it was assisted living with hospice in the back. And so you have a lot of people doing all the puzzle building and various things. And so I was assigned, my girlfriend was assigned to this woman who I believe was 92 or 93 years old. And we went into this room, and of course the place always smells horrible. I don't know what they're going to do about HEPA filter that air out of that joint, right? But anyway, I walk in, and then there's three women in this room. You OG listeners will remember this. Well, the 90-year-old woman, plus, got herself dressed every day, cleaned herself every day, looked phenomenal every day, and was completely mobile, walking around this place. And honestly, it must have been a situation where she could have taken care of herself at her own house, but there must have been some family issue with her being by herself, or maybe she wanted to be with friends or some people she could call her friends or make friends with, I should say. But the woman in the middle was 86, still a pretty damn good age, right? She was wheelchair bound. Not sure what happened to her, didn't ask her why. And then there was a 74-year-old woman who was a beautiful woman that they dressed her up every day. And she always had lipstick on, and her makeup was done every day, but she was a vegetable. She was just laying down in her bed, a lot of times with her eyes open. And so the 93-year-old one was not that interested in me at all, like having a conversation. She was like, I got to go, So my girlfriend never came back, but I kept coming back. Sat down, had a great conversation with 86-year-old, fully lucid, just happy to be alive. And then I would sit next to the 74-year-old. And I'd just talk to her because she's alive and she could probably hear my voice. And if nothing else, maybe my voice just helps. I don't know. Never got a single physical response from her ever. I never touched her body with my fingertips, right? And I kept that up. And then I found the break room. And the break room was where the main room, I guess I should say, is where the party was at, right? And there was a piano in the corner. At the time, I was playing piano like crazy, writing tons of music. So I would just come, and I asked the ladies, I asked the woman who worked there, I said, can I play piano? And they're like, oh, they would love that. So I would just write music in this assisted living place and just work on my tunes, and nothing really loud and rambunctious. I do more of my more ballad stuff or whatever. Just try to write or play them the last thing I wrote or whatever. And no one really commented about the playing. But the room was just got the vibe that was cool, right? And then I would break and I would go in a circle. And I didn't feel like I could talk to any of the people because they're doing their own thing. I don't want to bother them. But it was the people that reached out and thought I was their son. And so I had never experienced this before. Now it's been on TV several times, right, in different programs. And now I'm aware of that phenomenon. I would look for it today. I didn't look for it back then. And sure enough, I'd just sit down and, I came to visit you. And I'd sit and have a conversation with somebody. The funny thing is I'd get up, walk 10 feet, someone else would do it to me, and I'd sit down with them, and I'm their son now. And the person behind me has just had a great moment and forgot that I exist, right? So I get to do it again and again. I think probably 3 times in one day was probably the tops. But that taught me the value of using your brain, or you're going to lose your brain. But obviously, don't toxify yourself with stuff. And unfortunately, some of these women probably and men fell victim to recommendations that were bad. But it just seemed like the more intelligent and witty these people were, they were just lucid as could be. And the more simple the conversation, the more they fell into the realm of dementia or something, right? And thought I was their son. They look at me right in the face. I'm sure they know what their kids look like. So at this exact recording, I haven't released the ISS video because I'm rendering a bunch of 3D for it. Get my notes together and all sort of stuff. But in the process of, downloading the ISS 3D model and looking at this thing. Okay, so let's say it's real, and for some reason all the footage on board is really suspect, or it's fake, and wow, what a tremendous amount of R&D and conceptualizing this vehicle in space, these modules, tons and tons of modules, right? It's wild where money can go to create something. And then you start having these weird feelings, where you're like, do they really put all this effort into something that doesn't exist? And nothing changes the fact that you see all the wires and the harnesses and the scuba tanks and the footage, and you're like, yeah, for some reason the answer is yes. For some reason there's never any stars in space, including the Milky Way, with digital cameras now that could film, and, if there's a match that's gone out 5 minutes ago, you can still see the amber inside of it. Like, it's a ridiculous excuse for why things are occurring. It's illogical and impossible. No, I don't think anybody wants to believe that any of this stuff is not real. And I think that, the other part of it is that we want to know what is real. Because in the end, who knows? Maybe one of you could come up with the solutions that they're facing, but since the problem is never presented to the world does not get to contribute to the solution. Think about the logistics of the whole thing. Okay, NASA has to create the moon missions, and so they've got a problem on their hands. They've got thrust issues. They've got gravity issues. They've got a Van Allen belt issue. They have the vacuum of space issue. They've got trying to land in a vacuum going 3,800 miles an hour and slowing down with the fire engine in a vacuum. I mean, like all these problems, right? So they've got to hire some brilliant people. And of course, the worst thing you could do is pat yourself on the back that you have the smartest people when you don't, because it was America against Russia. So it can't be any other country assisting in this project. It's got to be only Americans and really loyal, high clearance people. And maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't have the right brain to say we should take, 20 components down to 12. It's trying to add more components to fix the problem, going in the wrong direction of engineering. The other thing is if they identify a problem that's insurmountable, well, they can't tell the world about that problem. In their brain, they can't, because they risk no one being able to solve the problem. And now all of a sudden the world goes, well, I guess America's never going to the moon because of that one problem right there, whatever that problem might be. So they create a catch-22 within their paradigm. You can't find the brains that can actually solve your problem. Oh yeah, they try to push up MIT. They try to push up Caltech. They try to harvest kids through Mensa and Prometheus. But then they have a problem where you might have a really smart kid who doesn't want to tell a lie. Well, now what do? Right? Do you put some people on the ground to have conversations with the kid, talk to his counselor, and see if he's a liar? See if he'll cross that with you for whatever national security you might throw some bunch of bullshit at him? This is one of the major reasons why a bunch of us want this whole thing revealed so we can get to the next level. Now, there's some of us that believe that what they learned their lesson at one point. I'm going to do an episode about a book that was released. I don't want to quote the year, but I think it's in the late 50s, early 60s. That's about, I think, what they're calling G engines. Some of you will know about this. I just posted a video on our Telegram channel, Deep Thoughts channel. And it's a book that was written that essentially, it was written by a genius, and it was an article, and there's been a book written about the article, excuse me. And the article was lamenting about all these major companies that turned into all the big aeronautical companies that we have today, and they were all in cahoots and said that they had completely determined how to create anti-gravity engines using nuclear power. This was a done deal. It just wasn't efficient enough yet to release, but they're coming, and it's going to change all of our modes of transportation. Now, again, I found lectures back to the mid-60s. I don't know where I would find them again, but I watched them where a professor on a whiteboard they were filming it. I mean, it was amazing that it was that important they were filming it, but he was showing you how electromagnetic fields can create gravity wells, and you could get anti-gravity. It's just, the professor said, we do not have a big enough power source to make this field occur just yet, but we're almost there. He kept saying we're almost there. So I think there's been a shift. And apparently this whole thing was squashed. All knowledge of this article was, suppressed, and it went underground. Now, again, I have a mentor of mine who's long passed now, a couple of years gone, 3 years gone. Is that right? It was 5 years gone now. And people would visit his house and tell him where we are. Not explain how the engines work, but definitely deprecate previous conversations about, remember when we told you about that tech, the Taurus with the spinning Mercury? That's old news. We don't use that anymore. We've got the engine now down pat. But instead of Kennedy going out there and saying, we're going to go to the moon in a zero-G vehicle, they keep it under wraps. They keep it way under the radar. So they have ultimate control of a technology that, can do all kinds of wild stuff, right? Inconceivable tic-tac and gimbal stuff, right? That's what those two things were. Those are under the Navy, Black Ops, not Air Force. They're under Navy, and that's where they're also flown over water. In case they fall out of the water, you can scoop them up and they won't have as much damage. Supposedly off the coast of Guam, again, there's been several sightings. I finally got a 2-degree contact with someone who confirmed what I think, a lot of folks have said this, but Dr. Greer. I don't know about Dr. Greer, but he mentioned this several times. And I think Dr. Greer is a guy to get ahead of the picture. He's the PR guy that gets ahead of it, and he's branded himself as one of us. And, he's just there to scoop us all up into his either loop where you don't do anything because he's got all the answers, or he's there to swat you away when you really start walking towards the technology. I hope he's legit. Without meeting the guy and having a good conversation with him, I can't say. I had a friend of mine talk to him for like 8 hours in 2 conversations. And I think he likes talking to my friend because she doesn't have the academic background to ask him anything intelligent. So he likes just to have a conversation. I think he was looking for money too. One of the things I ask myself every once in a while, and you might have done this too, but you may not have. So this might be an interesting thought for you to process for a little while. Where will it all end? Will the truth ever come out? Can it ever come out? If we went tomorrow in a 0G vehicle and it was public knowledge, would they say all of a sudden, yeah, we didn't really go back in 69 through 72. That kind of all that stuff is BS. But guess what? Not only did we just go yesterday, but in a year, you can buy a ticket to go. Are you going to forgive us? Of course, almost no one cares whether or not the past events occurred, except for people like us. And the next generation is going to be, oh, yeah, man, sure, I don't care about that old stuff. That's old stuff. That's more than 23 years old. Therefore, it doesn't exist, right? As they say, history that's 23 years old is almost completely forgotten in the surviving humans that exist. And that is I have to say, that is pretty accurate. So let's go through a few scenarios, have some fun here at the end, even though I have quite a bit of a stick left. So there's full admission at some point, and I think that the factors that would contribute to a full admission is, one, the country gets a good president, perhaps again, and there's no holes barred, and it sets us in motion so that the following presidents, be them whoever they are, they're just as good as the first good one we get. And therefore, it is a brute force admission that these things were faked. Damn the torpedoes, right? Then there's a very controlled version by the organizations without any changing of the country's spirit as a whole, going back to its republic, where people have rights because they're born and they're alive. And it would be a spin doctor kind of thing that would have to go something like this. Everyone who's alive back then is dead at the time they give this confession, which means all the astronauts have to be dead. Anyone of any significance in the decision-making chain of command, which I think probably is the case today, are all gone. And therefore admitting that those 6 missions, including 13 that didn't make it, supposedly, and all the other 8 and 10, anything that said they went to the moon, simply is just blown out. And they'll have a bunch of spin about why it was a good thing, why they felt compelled. They won't do any we's, they'll do they's. But then they'll double down and say, but we are absolutely dedicated to getting there today, hence a Project Orion. I'll take either one. But can you imagine the Project Looking Glass supercomputer that would be looking at the algorithm of, well, what's going to happen if you legitimize this particular conspiracy within friend circles and family circles with people that know other conspiracies that still haven't been diffused, as they might say? Meaning, you can't have someone talk about that day in 2001 and also be the same person that mentioned the stuff that happened in the 60s and 70s about the moon missions. You can't legitimize that one because then you'll legitimize this other one, and all those people are still alive. And so we'll have a bunch of people coming after us. That's the resistance. That's why I think it has to be a brute force admission. Sadly, though, you can take a candidate for president or a brand new president and say, President, whoever, it's really important that we continue lying about this because it will compromise national security because we've been lying our asses off and violating the Constitution in its completeness, right? Now, the other one we talked about a couple times on various hundreds of shows, is the sort of the apocalyptic reset of society in whatever manner it happens, right? A war, some sort of fake disease, or a real one, or whatever, and it gets everything boiled all the way down where you're sitting in the future. We've restabilized society. The governments that were are no more. I can't remember the Christopher Nolan movie with Matthew Broderick where he's crying for 20 minutes and everyone thinks it's the best scene on planet Earth. If you remember that movie, he goes to school to talk about his daughter with the teachers, and they say that his daughter said that they went, and the school is saying, but we didn't go. And they actually tell you the exact reason, probably the real reason why we didn't go in the movie. So they're kind of preparing you for the truth, right? Lots of shows have done this, right? I thought that movie sucked. I thought that movie was so bad I can't remember the name of it. I saw it once and I wanted all my money back and my life back. Well, if that one occurs, we won't be there to see it, most likely. Not because we'll be murdered or something, but just it'll probably happen so far in the future that by the time things reconstitute, we'll be so old we won't know. Who knows, right? The other scenario would be further leaking of very damning information, which they could always fight, right? Well, something very interesting in general about smoking guns. It takes a logical mind to know what you're seeing. And it takes someone with an open mind, with a logical mind, to know what they're seeing and accept it. And it needs you to use that to go through the facts as quickly as possible to come up with a judgment on what you're looking at, right? When I was a kid, I've told you this before too, my dad used to get me Dell Logic Problem books. And if any of you know what these things are, it's so yesteryear. There's actually an app now on my iPad I downloaded that is the Dell Logic Problem situation. But they would basically give you a grid, just like a spreadsheet, and the rows have labels and the columns have labels. And then there's a little story down below, and it gives you enough facts to solve the puzzle of, what is it? Colonel Mustard with the knife in the living room. It gives you all those little facts inside this little paragraph. When you first read it, you're only seeing 2 or 3 places you can immediately go, okay, it just said here, Colonel Mustard was in the study. So you do Colonel Mustard study because it's the places across the top. I used to love these things. I don't even know how much per ratio of the book I was actually able to solve. A lot of them kicked my ass, But it got me thinking logically at a really young age, and that really helped my code. Code is all logic too, right? Logic gates you're creating. And when you suspend more things in an application, all these different buttons are in different states and fields have different values in them. And you're only supposed to surgically update, certain things because new data came in from the back end, but you can't break a print button, from functioning, all this kind of stuff. Figuring out, well, that cancels this cancels that. That's good brain work for you constantly, which is why if you're in any type of job where you're solving problems, even being a carpenter, especially being a carpenter, and you're doing work on very specialized home projects or new building projects, and nothing comes in the same, right? We need a new table, but it's got to be a weird shape and it's got to fit in this corner. Or your guy that lays tile and it's just, oh God, this room is a trapezoid. You're going to use your methods, and it's good for your brain every single day, A smoking gun is nothing more than a Dell Logic problem. The Kennedy assassination is a great one. The logic of someone being able to shoot him twice from the book depository window in a moving car with a big tree in the way and an ever shrinking moving target, and the true anticipation of where the bullet's going to be. It leads you to a point where what they say happened was impossible. The magic bullet that flies all over the car, right? And so, of course, they hatched the grassy knoll. They hatched the grassy knoll theory. Oliver Stone was allowed to obsess on the grassy knoll story. All kinds of weird misinformations on the net about who that shooter was. And I think they said, last time I read it, because it changes, It was a French assassin that died in South America on some weird, project. And what that does for your brain, if you hate that shooter in your mind because you love Kennedy, just remember Marilyn Monroe was murdered. Marilyn Monroe was murdered, and Bobby Kennedy was in the room with her. So there's some weird stuff about that family, right? His heart was in the right place, I think. Who knows, right? Maybe JFK is not to be associated with his brother. I don't know. But if the organizations that did it are the ones that give you the solution, and they tell you the guy that did it died in South America, well, then you're just like, you just wipe your hands clean. Well, at least he got what he deserved, and I don't need to look into that anymore. And then you learn that the car stopped for a few seconds. That footage was cut out. You learn this kid, 18-year-old kid in a rain drain, had the perfect shot. They did the logistics on the shot. And that kid went up and went to work and got taken away. When you see the footage that Bill Cooper put out, where the driver of the car pulled out a gun and was going to shoot Kennedy in the head, but the passenger of the car, another Secret Service dude, grabs the steering wheel. It's all timed. So when he slows the car down for that death shot, he is slowing down the car to zero. He grabs the steering wheel, and all of a sudden Kennedy's head goes poof. But what they did was apparently they cut out the frames where the car comes to a complete stop. So you just see it spliced together, right? And of course, when the head explodes, your brain is not worried about a missing frame. Smoking guns are not as devastating sometimes as you might think. The one about the moon missions that really stops everybody is the fact they never pointed a video camera at Earth. Would have been the number one thing you would do, is point a video camera at Earth. Instead, they gave you the Earth rising shot, which that astronaut took that. I just did an episode, mentioned Earth rising, and a few days later, a week later, the guy dies. I dearly hope we have no association with that problem. But the other one is and we're talking about getting ahead of the problem. I forgot what astronaut it is, but the dude who lives in Malibu, he is a member of a ufology group, and they love him. Why? Well, it's not that UFOs don't exist. It's just that this astronaut comes into their organization, steps up to a podium and says, "Oh yeah, we saw a ton of them up there. That's why we never went back to the moon." What an amazing way to get fanboys for a conspiracy that we never could have gone in the first place. We found aliens up there. It was a line out of Total Recall from 1990. Oh, we were going in those pyramids until we found alien shit in it. And that's when Arnold Schwarzenegger goes something like, well, that's what they say. That's what those conspiracy people say. And he looks at Arnold and he goes, you really believe that? Like, this dude's saying I was in there and we saw it, and you just got here and you're saying that we're crazy. How ironic is that moment in that film? That's the way it happens in real life. I'm sure there's a moment in almost everyone's life, you probably have to live a few decades to get this to occur, where you witnessed something. You were there. Doesn't matter if it's huge or small or whatever. It usually has some amazing fact, something miraculous. I don't mean supernatural or anything, but just something wild that happened. Your grandpa caught a 4-foot trout and threw it back in the water for some reason, or he lost it for some reason on the pole. You were there. You saw it. Now, of course, psychologists will be that you think you saw it, but you didn't. And there's evidence that happens too, right? But there are moments when you really see something. You were there. You touched it. You smelled it. You tasted it. And you tell other people this happened. And then they say, oh, you're full of crap. You're a liar. And that moment is a really wild moment for you. Because you're like, well, I don't tell lies. I'm not the Aesop fable, the boy who called wolf. I have no history of tall tales. Why would you all of a sudden just react and say that I'm lying? Why would you do that? If anything, I've got the reputation of the absolute opposite of that. And it's only when a second party or more enter the room, enter the conversation and say, oh yeah, man, he's telling the truth. That damn thing was this big, it came up, look at my shirt. It's all splattered with the fish, and this is like, what? That's the tail. That's the head. That's 4 feet, And then the guy or gal might go, well, that's crazy. That's wild. That's wow. Did you hear what these guys just said? And suddenly he's your best friend. And he wants to get prizes for passing that story around. I've had several of these moments in my life. Sometimes because of who I am and what I know, and other times because I know somebody, and other times because crazy shit happens at Disneyland. Okay. By the way, YouTube scrapped, I believe, Ghosts and Demons off my channel. I don't know where I said anything that would make their sensory bots go crazy. But they scrubbed it off. It's off on BitChute, probably on Rumble. Before we get to the end, I do want to say we have a brand new store with some cool stuff. I finally ordered the shirts myself. They're coming in really clean. I do think you should wash them before you wear them. I think that'll, there's a little bit of a chemical smell when you get them. Just depends on what kind of dude you are or dudette you are. Just clean them off and they're absolutely perfect. And I'm going for the top fabrics, and that's why they're a little bit more expensive, because I want them to last for 20 years or more. But it's just a little something to start conversations. There's a new moon one up there that's all about the collision with the Apollo top part of the lunar lander trying to rendezvous with the service module. There's no words on it, so it's totally generic to any language on planet Earth, and you can just put it on and see what happens, right? But I want to shake that off. Again, I want to stress that the shirts actually have different prices based on their size, and so if you're a smaller person, you can definitely save quite a bit of money. If you're triple XL or more, it starts going up in price. Some of those 5XLs are out of stock from time to time. They're just running out of the shirts on their end, or they don't heavily stock it on their end. So just so you know, those are up there. And even though the previews are all black in most cases, go into the product and they're in all kinds of colors too. And they look great on different colors. So I need to get some different colors as well. But no, too, the channels had a huge surge during the last 2 Moon Hoax episodes, about 1,100 new subscribers, which for me would take, with shadow banning, I'm lucky to get 10 in a month. They say I get 30 in a month. I don't think I get 30 in a month. And then it went all the way up. It's about 6,052 right now, I think, somewhere in there. Maybe it's 6,152. Whatever it is, it's been hovering between... They stopped it at 6,043. And it just stayed there for like 2 weeks, which is patently impossible with the amount of views we're at. We have massive views right now. And so, now the other one I want to just toot a horn here is that my friend Vivian Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick's daughter, was on perhaps one of the last shows of a guy in Austin with the initials AJ. And he interviewed her, and she mentioned our show twice, once at 13 minutes, one at 24 minutes. And she said Deep Thoughts twice. She didn't say Deep Thoughts Radio, so that might be a bit of an issue with people trying to find the channel. But she wasn't supposed to say anything. And we had talked the day before she had done the interview. She did a great job. It's about an hour and 47 minutes. She gets cut off a lot. I even learned some stuff. I've known her for years, and I learned some stuff about Stanley I did not know. There's one about the premiere of 2001. She said that 2/3 of the audience walked out. The famous premiere audience, right? So Rock Hudson, of all people, walked out of the movie within the first 10 minutes and said, I'm not watching any more of this blasphemous crap, because he was referencing man being portrayed as a monkey. I guess I technically understand, but just chill, dude. It's just about evolution in general. Yeah, he was a very biblical person, wasn't he? But she said that by the time the movie was over, like 2/3 of these celebrities had walked out on his movie. And so he went home stressed out. He's getting all these calls from the studio that nobody liked, that the studio, we're doomed. This is going to be a mess. We spent so much money, like $11 million in the 60s was a lot of money, man. And so he stayed up all night. Then they got in the car, drove down to the local theater, and just parked outside of the theater to see, I think it was a 10 o'clock showing. Fairly decent line out front. Then the next showing, much bigger line. She said that by 2:00, the line was around the block, and he'd had one phone call the night before by a young executive who wasn't really a big, decision maker, but he said, "Don't worry, man, this movie's going to go places. You just created a masterpiece." The guy got it, And sure enough, when he saw the line around the block, he's like, "Okay, I'm all right. I'm going to survive." And of course, today it's revered as probably one of the best science fiction movies ever made. You can find it on Rumble, BitChute, whatever. We post it on Telegram as well. But so, we get a little bit of stuff going around. That's cool. But anyway, let me know what you think. This is the cerebral side of the entire battle, and I'd be most interested in your successes and failures and just communicating this information. We've had some great stories from people. We had one of our listeners. It still just rings with me. It'll probably ring with me for a long time. He's of Indian descent, and when India said they had landed the probe on the moon, it was around some celebratory time. I think it was maybe Thanksgiving or something, and his father was so proud that this thing had landed on the moon. And our listener had the guts to say, "Well, Dad, I really don't think that's possible because of this, this, and this." Now, maybe a probe is possible, but again, you can't land the thing is the big problem. Not without balloons the size of like Philadelphia. Anyway, he got a big argument, I guess, as a result of that. And that's, sort of taking one for the team, if you know what I mean. Dad's never going to be swayed, but maybe the kids can temper their ingesting of probably lies, and so they don't get that weird tarry feeling in their soul that has to be purged at a later time. But if you haven't gone to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. Everything's up there. It's a pretty strong template up there. I've got everything indexed. If you find any broken links, it would normally be because maybe one of the links still goes to YouTube. If YouTube is still cool, because we figured them out, right? So I'm able to keep the YouTube version of it. It's just, I like it because it's the easiest player in the planet Earth. It just behaves well on all the devices. But do let me know. You can just contact me at YouTube at deepthoughtsradio.com. It comes right to me. The other place you can see this show, because I always say BitChute has them all, and Rumble almost has them all. The problem with Rumble is the interface for the creators is awful. And you can no longer search your channel to find a video like on YouTube, and you go in the studio, you just go up to the search field and say, "I need to figure out what did I call that episode again?" But they just screwed it up. But the other one is Odyssey, and it is a great service. It's really weird to log into their interface, but I've got them linked to YouTube. And so you don't get the chaos reports, but you get YouTube, and their player is excellent. Their whole tech team is just great. I wish somehow Odyssey and Rumble could get together and just scrap the Rumble platform and use the Odyssey platform with their categories. I think they're a lot better, and their automation for sucking down YouTube channels is great. And you can add, if I got to figure out how to log back into that thing. It's got this horrible 2-factor authentication and some other weird stuff. Every single time you log in, you have to get a link to log in. Please let me in. Okay, check your email. Thanks a lot, whatever. But it's a beautiful service, just so you know. If you guys ever look back on my old episodes, there used to be a website called vid.me, and it was beautiful. It was a lot like BitChute, but the guy just gave up one day. It was the weirdest thing on earth. He had a great service, good traffic, and when they just pushed really hard on these organizations to disappear, he just said, "I don't have it in me to fight this battle." And he just didn't merge with anybody, he just turned it off. So unfortunately, I've got hundreds of references to vid.me. Just understand that doesn't exist. So I try to keep the links inside the YouTube videos really current. I don't cut and paste over all the commercial links to Rumble and BitChute. I feel like if you're on those platforms, you're a very dedicated soul to those platforms. So you're where you want to be. I get it. If you're on YouTube, I think most of you are looking for alternate methods of watching things. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.